Well, it's 7 o'clock. We're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to probably start off with hardware. If we have time, we'll maybe go to a couple of metal pieces or take a bunch of questions about maybe even what we discussed the last three talks, if anybody's on here that was at those. So hardware, I think, is very underappreciated. And there's a lot of work that goes into making a simple pull. I'm going to flip me around here so I can hold a piece of hardware in front of the camera. So this is a Gustav oval drawer pull, okay? And you can see that it's all hammered. It's nicely chased around the edge. It's a very heavy gauge. And the post that holds the bail comes all the way through the back, and it's been filed off. It's been peened down first and then filed off so that the back spreads on the back side of the copper plate. Occasionally you'll see these pull through, but not near as often as, say, an LNJG pull, where the piece of copper on the back plate is about half the thickness of the gust pull. So I think that gave the gust pull a little advantage to holding on to that bail post a little stronger. But these are notorious for coming off, or a piece of furniture coming in with the bail in the drawer and the post gone. You know, and then you got to try to figure out how to fix it, how to get it fixed. Sometimes you can buy pieces of hardware in the wild. Like this is a pair of Gus V pulls for a drawer that came in attached to a drawer and nothing else. You know, so whenever this would happen, I would buy the piece for the hardware and just keep the hardware in case a piece came in that was missing a piece. And occasionally it's been able to help me restore several pieces over the years. See that the hammering on these is quite nice, and the bail is tapered, and I believe the bail on this is cast and then peened and chased to smooth it out, soften it up, harden the stock, because by hammering it, it kind of anneals the copper. I think that's the term, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Yeah. So again, now
are the LNJG pulls the things that hold the handle on? Are they peened over like on the Gus ones? Or are they?
Well, they're a little different. They're not as deep and they're not as wide, but I think that's because the plate is smaller. But you can see this pull. It's already starting to, this post is already starting to pull out of this back plate. You can kind of see it in the reflection of the light. So years ago, there was several people that were making pieces of hardware that was pretty affordable for replacements. And at least I thought they were affordable. And I'll show you why I say that, because this is an example of a new piece of hardware. And you can, I'm gonna go over here to a drawer, and I'm gonna put this on the drawer next to an original piece of hardware. So besides them being different sizes, and these V-pulls came in different sizes, you can kind of see that, you know, the original piece of hardware is nicely shaped, nicely hammered, peened all around the edges. And the new pull is not quite as graceful of a bail. The peening's not as accentuated around the edges, and the hammering is done just kind of as decoration. I mean, this might have been done as decoration too, but at least that it was peened over the entire piece. It wasn't just kind of spot peened. And so, you know, this piece, I actually bought 4 pieces of hardware that have been in my drawer since probably 1985. So when you just put it in the drawer, it's expensive hardware. I'll show you this is off of an LNJG sideboard, and this is a strap. Let me get back a little bit so you can see what these are. So a guy just, I'm getting a real bad echo.
Yeah, I don't know why.
A guy a couple of years ago brought in a whole set of hardware from a LNJG sideboard, and these straps were part of that collection. Yeah, I don't know why. It's not so bad.
Hey, Debbie, it was feedback because when you moved, it went away.
So this hardware is as thin as the back plates of the LNJG poles, but at least they've, it's nicely executed, and it's really only decoration because this is actually a strap hinge, but as you can see, there's no hinge attached to it. So they put the hinge on the door first, and then they just butt this up to the edge of the hinge. So if you want to check to see if it's truly a strap hinge, you have to open the door and investigate and make sure that, or at least see if the strap is actually connected to the hinge.
Did they do that, David? Do you find LNJG pieces that actually are hinged?
Not very often.
Yeah, I've got a set, Ray. I've got a set of LNJG hardware that actually have the hinge attached to the strap.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they may have done that a little bit earlier on, and then they switched to just these decorative pieces, And I want to say I've seen Gus hinges on very late stuff that was also just straps.
And Dave, when we were in Michigan on that trip, we got to see that big collection in Michigan. And the fellow was showing us and he was disturbed that there were strap hinges on some of those earlier pieces of Gus, the cabinets with the iron pulls, and that they were just decorative straps. They weren't connected to the hinges.
Was that in Michigan or Wisconsin?
No, that was Michigan. That was
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and he pointed that out, that the straps Gus did use just decorative straps for a long time. And okay. I suppose it's easier to make, and that's what I was going to actually mention sometime tonight. He found that to be interesting and not only interesting, but disturbing in his world. It shouldn't have been like that. So,
right.
But they look fun. They look great, right. But nonetheless.
Mike, you were trying to say something there and it got stepped over.
The majority of the strap hinges, unless it's like the desk that's right behind Dave,
right,
purely decorative and weren't part.
Right, that desk is that's a true strap hinge. That desk.
Right, right.
Yeah. But that's because the half of the whole hinge is exposed, so you had to do that.
Right, right. So I'm going to show you a set of strap hinges that aren't just decorative, that are actually true hinges. And first it's on this. So this is a 1902-03 Gustav Stickley sideboard. And it's got pretty amazing hardware on it.
Does that post the Starburst type hardware, or is that earlier?
This is earlier. And so the hinges are, let me grab my light. Sorry. So you can see on here that the hinge is definitely attached to the straps and not to the case. So, and this is,
we couldn't see that.
This is also on the outside.
It's obvious there.
Yeah, it's very obvious there. I'll show you another piece that it's not so obvious. Well, this one is too, because here's the barrel of the hinge.
Point it up a little.
Oh. Barrel of the hinge there. And then on the inside, you can see it there. Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
If the hinge wasn't together like that, in other words, the strap and the hinge are together, you would see the other half of the hinge mortised on into the inside of the door.
Right.
But you only see one leaf of the hinge mortised into the door. So where'd it go? Well, it's part of the strap.
Right, exactly. But same with this hinge.
Yeah.
That's obvious.
Okay, any questions about anything so far?
I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, were there any cases in the hardware in which the hinge pins were ball tipped at some point? Were they all just pins, the way we've seen in the examples?
They were ball tipped, like these hinges.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of bookcases were like this.
Okay, all right. And so then in some of the other case pieces, they would just be, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, without a ball tip.
Well, I think if they were hinges like this that didn't have straps and were meant to be seen on the outside of the case, they would have been ball tipped. I don't think I've ever seen one without it, you know, with just those kind of ends, you know.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Hey, David,
Dave.
David, on the two poles that you had purchased that had paint around the edges,
Yes.
how would you get the paint off without removing the patina?
Well, believe it or not, you can use a citrus-based stripper and it won't remove the patina. So if you have even a Roycroft, but you should always test the stripper before you just plunge the stuff into it. But if you have like a Roycroft vase that has lacquer on it and it's all crusty and it's all like you know, it's cloudy and very unattractive, you can actually strip that lacquer off and get down to the original patina very easily. But I've only tried it with the citrus-based stripper, and that's, you know, that's neutralized by water, so there's no other chemicals needed, and it's very it's not very caustic at all. You know.
What do you use? A toothbrush? You don't use steel wool, right?
No, you just put it on and wash it off.
Dave, would they shellac
water?
They shellac these after the patina, just to keep the finish stable, or
not on the hardware usually. I don't think I've ever seen that really.
So once it's patina, they just leave it.
Yeah, might be waxed. I mean, it does. You know, it does, Tim. It does have a sheen to it, but I think that's just the copper. I think that's just the patina on the copper and maybe some wax. You know.
Yeah.
Are there examples in which you found, I guess, fakes or forgeries that are really challenging to tell the difference, other than patina-wise? Have you come across any of those where it's like, wow, it's a close call, for example, to determine if it's genuine?
On hardware?
Yeah, on hardware.
I'll tell you, there's a couple of guys that do restoration, a lot of restoration for a lot of dealers in this country that can make a piece of hardware that you can't tell the difference. You could pull the hardware off, look at the back, examine them both, and you won't be able to pick out the reproduction. You'll be second guessing yourself.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it can be really difficult in some cases.
It can be really difficult. Yeah.
And if it's that difficult, does it really matter? I guess only that you're getting a better, you're paying more for something that's got replacements on it.
Well, it depends on what you want in the end.
Right. Yeah, I think it does matter. You know, I think if anything that's been restored should at least be documented. You know, something as important as a piece of hardware or two. You know, I think that's kind of a big deal.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see. So let's go back. I'm only going back to the sideboard because this just came in today, and I'm just absolutely in love with the darn thing. Excuse me, Deb, but move over.
Surprise! It's fabulous.
Right. So this hardware.
Story of my life.
I gotta try to
I'm
get
not
down.
muted.
That's another small group discussion.
Yeah, right. For a different group. But it's beautifully crafted.
Super esoteric question. Should the slots all be aligned same direction, or is that just a little too anal?
Yeah, that's a little, I don't think I've ever seen a piece of hardware that's been put on where they actually aligned the slots and the screws. If it had pyramidal screws, I've seen those where they've put in an intentional direction.
So it's part of the arts and crafts motif.
Right. Now these have been look like they've been off and put back on at one point.
Alan, I'm sure that David would be happy to sell it to you so that you could fiddle with them all you want.
Right.
And Alan's putting a green.
Are those steel?
Working on
They're iron.
Or iron. Okay.
Yeah.
In the pistol stand. Sorry, Eric.
So can anybody recall any pieces of Gus furniture with straps that look like this?
Not I.
Or pulls.
Very English.
Or pulls. The pulls are harder, but let me show you a couple pictures. And one very obvious picture, if you subscribe to Rudy's books, this cabinet, it's got similar hardware on it with the blown out spade. And then there's also
that's much more simplified. The stuff that sideboard you have is very English looking hardware.
Like this one. Let me get better light on there.
You're okay.
It's got the same lobes.
So would that be central to a specific time period, like maybe 1902, 1903, or pieces?
I think it is 1902, 1903, and I think it was before Gus had his own foundry and metal shop to start creating his own hardware.
Before you move on, in high-end pistol collecting and stuff, we have a name we use for lining up slotted screws like that. It's called clocked. So you talk about clocking the screws, just for a word use.
Right. Out here, we call it green and green sensibility out here.
Oh, sure.
In Pasadena, right. It's the green and green sensibility.
Right.
At least I do.
David, do you know who in 1902 would have been making the hardware for him?
You know, I don't. And Mike McCracken and I and Tim McGinn and I have had multiple conversations about that, about who else could have been making his hardware. For a while, I thought maybe it was Onondaga Metal Shops, which was a division of Syracuse Ornamental Iron Works, and then bought by Harry Benedict. Yeah, but I'll show you something else. This is a catalog. Let me flip this around again. This is a one of catalog. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. So I got pretty close. So it's all of Benedict Studios.
I'm seeing this one went to his shop.
Some of those pools look like LNJG, later LNJG.
Not well, you know, they have some of the same shape, but they're definitely different.
Not the plate. I was just talking about the pole.
The bales.
Yeah, bale, yeah.
But isn't it right that OMS started business in 1905?
I thought it was earlier than that.
That's what, I'll have to go look at your article, but I think I found them once.
I thought Harry Benedict bought OMS in 1905.
In 1906, but let me check.
All right. So these are just some other pieces of hardware that are in this thing. But this was a pretty, an amazing catalog that I was able to buy. But it had all Benedict's lighting in it and some really wild stuff.
So this hardware would have been sold to people other than Stickley then?
Yeah, yep. This was a salesman's catalog. And you see four very familiar forms there.
And that comes from Birmingham. Some of them come from Birmingham originally, right?
These pieces?
Birmingham,
no.
England. Yeah, the two top.
Well, the designs do, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Spittle.
Spittle designs, yeah.
Right.
That's an outstanding resource. Do you have any plans moving forward to possibly digitize it?
Well, I'm talking to a publisher now about that, and maybe a book on demand, something like that.
Great. I hope it happens.
Yeah, it's pretty thick. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, and there's prices and, you know, some other tidbits of information. There's two photos that are kind of cool in the back of it here. I'll show you those before I go on to something else. This is the foundry,
cool.
Which I thought was a pretty great photo.
Don't talk, Eric. I can't see it now.
In this photo.
If you guys are having trouble seeing him while people are talking, you can pin David so that he stays on the screen big.
Thank you.
Welcome.
You could see the forms he's working on.
Those are slightly big.
Yeah.
So is he.
It's a kind of an interesting book. So
any research on?
Sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was just wondering if there's any research been done with Benedict Studios in terms of, have you guys done any research in terms of the staff there, designers and staff?
No, we haven't. I haven't. There's really not much to be found about them. You know, we dug for it back in like around 1990, I think, and maybe 95. And I had a woman locally who was a descendant of the Oberdorfer foundry, who actually had some relation with the arts and crafts period. Didn't you mention Oberdorfer to me, Mike?
Yeah, Gus bought cast hardware from Oberdorfer.
Right.
In particular, I think I call them butterfly. Everybody has a different name for them.
Those star poles.
Lobbed corners.
Right.
They were a brass and bronze foundry. So if they were iron, I'm thinking he had them made somewhere else, unless Oberdorfer would do iron. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I've only seen those in iron myself.
Yeah, but I think they came from Oberdorfer, because that was the primary in 1900 and 1901 when he started doing that. That was his primary source of casting.
Right. So right here, you see this little bottle of called aluminum black. This is what gunsmiths use to darken barrels and scratches on guns and things like that. Well, it works really nicely if you get a piece that the copper has a scratch on it, and you take a little brush and just hit the scratch with this, and then wipe it right off, and it'll darken the scratch so that you won't even be able to find it. And it's about $8 a bottle, but it's well worth it.
But that's for iron? Is that what you said?
No, this is for copper. This is for any metal.
Oh.
Yeah, any, is it ferrous metal?
Non-ferrous.
Any non-ferrous metal, yeah. Yeah.
I went back to your article, and Benedict bought OMS in 1907.
Okay. And OMS was founded in 1905? No.
Let's see. Yeah, organized in 1905 by Howe.
Okay, so then that it must have been Syracuse Ornamental Iron Works, because I think they first started the art studio there in downtown Syracuse. I think. I'd have to go back. It's been a long time since I read that.
Well, I mean, the Onondaga metal shops, even if they didn't mark things or stuff, could have been part of Syracuse Ornamental Iron Works, making stuff for people. You know,
right.
It took one guy or two guys to be able to do it.
Right.
You know, Dave, I was just looking at the sideboard that in Rudy's book with the Starburst hardware compared with the one back there. There's a lot of differences in that sideboard you have.
Yeah, it's not the same piece.
When
I first saw it, I thought it was the same piece, but even the butterfly keys have to be in a different place because of those straps going across.
Right, and it's smaller than this one. The sides are a little not quite as thick.
It's really something.
So any other observations or questions?
Have you talked about the little round nails yet?
Oh, the tacks. I had them out here because they were in the same bin. I mean, I've got thousands of these. These are actually old used ones that have been cleaned down, and then they could be repatinated to make it look however you wanted to.
I've just wondered because there's been so many. I've seen so many leather top tables and things with these round things, and yet they're not consistent. Did he use many, you think, different suppliers for those things?
Only one supplier, right, from 1900.
Yeah, I think they're kind of all the same.
Because
they may be different sizes.
Square-headed pyramidal tacks, all of the round-headed tacks, even some of the ornamental tacks, like the Stickley Museum at Craftsman Farms has that leather top table they just got, which has different kind of tacks on it. They all came from one company. The company's name was H.L. Judd.
Well, that's interesting. Where was that, Mike?
In New York, of course.
New York. So sometimes you can, and because like even these were made by the same company, not by the Stickley company.
No, he bought them.
Yeah, he would buy these. You can find these. I think I got a couple of tubs this size full from my upholsterer from a job that he reupholstered, and they didn't want to reuse them, and they were just sitting on his shelf. But these can be very hard to find now. And here's some of the bigger tacks. These are, let's see, These are new tacks with a new patina on them.
Those are the kind I was talking about because, I mean, I've seen much rounder. Those kind of flatten out, and they're not quite like half a round. Like a,
no, none of them are that round. They're all kind of flattened a little bit.
So if I had one with rounder things, then they've been replaced.
You know, I'm not going to say yes or no because you know all situations can be different, but because Gus was buying all of his tacks from one location, I would think that they would be pretty close in size and in shape to each other.
Yeah, but he had about 20 different types in the inventory.
Right.
In the same company. So
right.
To answer Ray's question, who knows?
So somebody had asked if this was marked, and this is marked with the 0203 decal on the back.
The doors have one set of butterfly keys, whereas the smaller one with the pins on the side have two sets of butterfly keys.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't really fit another set on there with the strap hinges.
Not with the strap hinges. No.
Right. So does anybody have any stories about hardware and metalwork you want to share with everybody? Any experiences with it?
You know, talking about those pyramid tacks you're showing there right now.
Yeah.
If you're ever, I had a chair one time that somebody had put inappropriate fabric on it, but they used those, they pulled the tacks off and put the tacks back in. Some of those are copper, or maybe all of those are copper. And if you're ever prying those out, you want to pry them on both sides, two sides at the same time.
Absolutely.
To keep from bending or breaking that copper shaft off. And if you're putting them back in, you want to pre-drill the holes because you can also bend them very easily.
Right. And see how this one's actually bent. Yeah. So what you want to do in this circumstance is pre-drill the hole at an angle.
Good advice.
Yeah, don't try to straighten that pin.
No, it'll pop off in a heartbeat.
And also, when you're tapping those in, make sure you cover your metal hammer with a piece of cloth or use a block of wood so that you don't scratch the top of it with a claw hammer.
Right. Well, what I use is a leather mallet.
Even better.
It's a product you can get in an upholstery catalog, and it's just like a thick shoe leather rolled up, wet, and then it dries hard, and it works nice for hammering tacks in, or even the glides on the bottom of case piece legs. Because so many times that steel glide will wear right out, and if you scrape it across the floor, you'll end up digging up a floor. And if you replace those, that works nice for those too.
I'll tell you a sad story if you're up for it.
Okay.
I found a beautiful VBAC chair, 15 years ago, maybe longer. Beautiful condition, beautiful finish. It had no seat. The seat had pulled through, but all the tacks were there ready to go. And I said, someday I'm going to reupholster this officially. So I stored it in a damp place. And by the time I went back to look at it, all the tacks had rusted to oblivion.
Really?
They were gone. They were just a mess of oxidization and rust. Gone. They must have been iron. I mean, they couldn't have been copper.
Right.
And
you waited a very long time.
Well, life got in the way, and one of those projects that Cindy had other things for me to do, I guess, but
my fault.
But it was very sad. And Dave's right. I mean, just have one VBAC chair worth of pyramidal tacks. Consider yourself lucky, I think, right, Dave?
It's all Cindy's fault. We know that.
Yes, absolutely. So should I walk around and look for different hardware?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. This is we'll stay in upstate New York for a couple minutes here, but this is kind of amazing hardware. This is Roycroft. And there's an example of their hinge. See, Alan, they didn't line up the screws on this one either.
Well, that's what happens when you employ convicts like Kip.
Right.
All right.
But you can see how little handwork they actually did on their hardware. All their hardware is usually this just flat copper. I mean, it's nicely cut out. I mean, it's beautifully made, but you don't really see the handwork that you would see on a piece of Gus hardware or a piece of L&JG hardware.
All the poles they did for the GPI furniture, though, were hand hammered.
Were they?
Yep.
Oh, all those handles that stick out?
Yep.
Yeah.
2,200 of them or something like that.
Right.
And Bruce, they were made about 1900, just a little after that. So they would have been
1913.
1913. Okay.
Right. This is on a mitered mullion bookcase. Nice oval bales.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
Go back to the mitered mullion. Oh, there you go. This is a great example. We've been talking about this, and Mike, you were in a conversation before. It seemed for a while that a mitered mullion had certain pulls, and then the other mullions had V pulls, and then it turns out that maybe they didn't. They used whatever they had in a transition form, so you really couldn't tell the age of a piece by what pull they had. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, because said some things that look like they should have different.
I'm curious about the patina on those poles. Is that, do you think, one of the patinas he offered, or has it been cleaned?
No, I think that's original. So the poles, the straps, all the hardware wasn't made for individual pieces of furniture. It was made and stored in a box. And when they finished making the piece of furniture, they would pick out the poles and put it on the cases or on the furniture that they were doing. And if they stopped making this case in, say, 1904, and they had 20 dozen round pulls left, they would have gone on the next iteration of case design. They're not going to waste them.
Right.
The opposite question, or for Tim, is when did the V pulls first show up? And that helps you understand at least.
Right. I would say 1904.
Exactly. Catalog D.
That was my impression.
Huh?
Yeah.
So if you find a piece that's 1902 and it wasn't a special order and it has V pulls on it, you got to question the provenance of that piece.
Right.
But like Dave said, if you have a piece that's a design that's 1904 and it has and it shows up in the catalog with a V pull, but it has a round pull on it, well, they probably had it sitting around. They put it on it.
Right.
Right. So
the question on the mitered mullions, is that a period before 1904, like maybe 1901 to 1903? Or did it stop existing on the mitered mullions? Did the mitered mullions stop existing at some point, maybe 1904?
I think mitered mullion was like phased out by 1904.
All right.
Or during 1904. I think it was just too expensive of a case design. I think I counted up like the number of pieces of wood in a single door of a mitered mullion, and it was amazing how many pieces of wood were in this thing, because these pieces of wood are they're not attached to this piece of wood. Okay, so this piece of wood is separate, and it's then glued on to here. So this is kind of like it's not a veneer, but it's just a separate piece of wood. So every section of these is, you know, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's 34 pieces of wood just for the mullions. And then you've got 4 for each pane of glass. And then you've got 4 for the case frame. You know, it starts to add up. And when you start putting all that work and handling all that wood and putting it all together and fitting it, and those, and, you know, the miters probably weren't, you know, they didn't just come off the saw like that. I'm sure they had to do a fair amount of hand fitting on that. It was much easier to, you know, create a case like this where they overlapped. And in this case design, the front is part of the back piece of wood that separates the glass panes that the glass stops are nailed to.
David, were the mitered mullions 100% unique to Gustav Stickley, or is that something he might have seen someplace else and borrowed the idea?
Good question, Bruce. I always assumed it was unique to them, but that's just because I'm a Gustav Stickley dope.
Yeah, I don't know.
Does anybody else have an opinion of that?
Cabinets as well?
I'm sorry, what?
Did he do the mitered mullions on the china cabinets, or just?
Yeah, like picture like the trapezoidal china cabinet.
Oh, yeah.
That has mitered mullions. Let's see. Yeah, there were other earlier china cabinets with the one with the gallery back, that the back is actually an inch or so higher than the sides. That has mitered mullions. Yeah, so there's a few designs of china cabinets that had mitered mullions, but not the standard china cabinets. I've never seen like a I don't know the model number, but the china cabinet that you see most often, the double door, they came in a straight apron or an arched apron. I've never seen one of those forms of mitered mullions.
There's a question about Limbert hardware.
Okay, we have a question about Limbert hardware. Limbert sideboard with copper hardware.
It's missing a keyhole plate and a door catch.
Any suggestions where you can find reproductions? The same. The only thing I could suggest on that is if you have examples. So what is the piece of furniture again, Deb?
Sideboard.
So if it's a sideboard and you're missing 2 pieces, you could probably if you email me, I'll give you the name of somebody that could probably make it for you. I don't think you're going to just find it out in the wild. But he's down in Atlanta. I don't have his number with me right now, but his name's Chris Bannock, and he's very good. So here's a piece of Limbert hardware. You can see like Limbert, you know, this is on a console table, so it might be a little bit later. You know, but they didn't, for the most part, Limbert's hardware was kind of cookie cutter like, I think. You know, I think Stickley Brothers was kind of the same, with the exception of some of their earlier designs that had all those copper corners and blown out copper fittings on it.
Dave, you went by a discussion, I think it was an iron discussion on some piece, the minimalist one, one of the, you went by it a few minutes ago.
It was a wardrobe, Dave.
Oh, the wardrobe. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is just a very simple, flat copper discussion plate, and it was meant to be opened with a key. You know, and you just unlock it and pulled it open.
You had the same kind of setup on the early panel drop front desk, just an escutcheon.
Yes, right, exactly. Yeah.
But you know, it's interesting. I don't think you'd want anything more decorative there. You don't need it, and it wouldn't work.
Right. Yeah. Right. Here's something I didn't show you earlier, but I think this is an interesting collection. This is all interior door hardware, but it came out of a home in Ohio that was being torn down, and the salvage guy saved all the locks, the keys, you know, the doors, the push plates for the kitchen, and it's all signed with the circular mark.
Wow.
They even saved the square screws.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everything is there.
Any chance that you saw a picture of the house by any chance?
No.
Ray, calm down, Ray.
I thought these were kind of cool, these push plates.
Did you know anyone making pewter hardware for British furniture?
I don't. You can just answer that in the chat. Oh.
Hey, Dave, here's Dave.
Yeah.
I have a question for you. Go back to some of those pulls you're looking at and go into the pyramidal screws now. And you can see trying to remove them, they had a tool that was much larger and then made all those circular rings around the copper, trying to remove them. I wonder if there's a special wrench that they used to insert those screws so it didn't damage it didn't damage the copper. You never see that damage on the original pieces, but you know, if you try to remove it yourself or somebody removes them, you know, you'll know it.
Right. So you're talking about damage like that. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, if somebody, yeah, exactly. You know, if somebody takes it off, they're going to leave footprints. There's no question about it.
Right.
But you never see it on the original pieces somehow. For some reason, unless they have some way that they use your magic aluminum stuff or equivalent.
Right.
Why not just have a little piece of very thick paper and screw it in against the paper and then tear the paper out around it? And then,
well, still the metal on metal would still, you know, right. That's what I thought. Whatever it is, they seem to do a good job. They seem to know what they were doing, right?
I know. I've used they're a pair of needle nose pliers that's bent at a 45-degree angle, and I can, if I put paper or something behind it and then screw in, I only have to do the last quarter turn or so after I've torn the paper out. And usually, if I'm careful, I don't scratch it. But taking it off is a whole different thing.
Right.
I just use a small crescent wrench and I'm careful.
Yes, you are.
You could just put blue tape on the jaws of your wrench.
Yeah, you could put some blue tape on it. Sometimes I use a piece of leather. You know, just put it over the screw and then use the wrench to tighten or loosen it. You know.
Nowadays, with the plastics industry, you could make a plastic wrench.
Yeah, you could.
Strong enough to do that, but they sure as heck didn't have anything like that back then.
No, it must be that the last fraction of a millimeter, they try to not make perfection the enemy of good, putting those things in there.
Right, right. So Bruce asked if there was somebody making reproduction keys or if there's a source for them. And the only one I've heard of that has tried it recently is Ronnie Ciramello down in Westchester, Pennsylvania, but he was making them out of sterling. And they weren't really lasting very well. I'm not sure if he ever made them out of a harder metal than that, but he's a jeweler by trade and he comes from a jewelry family. And they were beautiful keys, but probably more appropriate to put on a chain and wear around your neck.
But we just go back to the square screws for a minute, because some of the pieces of the farms have that on it. So that was pretty rare, or was that pretty common? I mean, this display you're showing, they're all the square screws. I mean, how many pieces did he have that on?
A lot.
Okay, I didn't realize it was that many. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it wouldn't be on like the hardware for a bookcase, you know, like this.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you just see the round-headed screws there, but he did use a lot of those. He must have gone through huge numbers, and there was a lot. And back in, I think it was around 1974, they auctioned off the contents of the Craftsman factory on Burnett Avenue in Syracuse. Now, Gus went bankrupt in 16, and then it was owned by United Crafts when Gus went together with Leopold and John George. And then Leopold owned that factory and turned it into a chair factory until the 50s, maybe the mid 50s. And then I don't think it was being really used for much of anything at all except storage until the early 70s. And there was a big auction there, and they actually auctioned off some machinery, and they auctioned off crates of pyramidal screws, full, thousands of them.
The 1904 inventory, which is taken in January 1904, so that's what's left after 1903. He had 30,000 pyramidal screws in the inventory.
Right.
So the
Mike,
story being told that he had created a tool to put the pyramidal screws on is not validatable.
Well, he didn't ever get a patent on it, so we don't know.
Okay, thank you. Okay. And no one was ever found.
I think generally you'll find the pyramidal screws on his lighting fixtures too, where they bolted to the walls. Not always, but.
What's interesting about the pyramidal screws, remember, is he filed a patent on that in what, 1901 or 2? Way back. And L&JG used them. Stickley Brothers used them. You see it on arts and crafts furniture. And that's always been a puzzle to me. It's like he cornered the market. He had a patent on it, and yet other people were using them. And he had to have somebody make them for him. He didn't make them.
All right, that's interesting. Mike, do you have that that chart?
Yeah, sure.
Can you put it up on your screen and do?
So that's a challenge. So, the stuff here. Just see, I'm supposed to do this.
Technologically savvy.
Right.
Go share screen.
While he's doing that, I'm going to
disable participant screen sharing. Whoever's the host, you have to let me do this. Is that you, Dan? Or is that Bruce?
I think that might be Bruce.
Isn't Deb the host?
Deb, are you the host or is Bruce the host? Oh, Mike, you're now co-host.
Okay. So I can do that now?
I think so.
You should be able to.
Okay, that's not. So now I have to, there it is. I don't know if you can see that.
Yep. Beautiful. Yeah.
Beautiful. On the right of your screen is that table that I put together, and the catalog number is reflecting of the numbers that you see of the pages from the 1905 catalog that I put up. You see the pages? I can't see what you're looking at because I'm looking at my screen that I'm trying to show.
267 is up in the left-hand corner of the most evident page. The standard bail. Okay. The other pages are
267. Okay. And do you see to the left of that another page of hardware?
Yeah, you're moving it over. Yeah.
Yep.
There's the star. There's the so-called star.
So if you look at, I got to get rid of this thing. So if you look at that list, this is the 1904 in January 1904 inventory. So that means, the beginning of 1904, the end of 1903. And, you see number 27. I have no idea. Let's see, 28. 28 is the escutcheon, like Dave might have shown you. Okay, he had about 25 of those sitting around. And coot hooks, he had about 50 of those. And the number 32, which is the one to the right of that one I just mentioned, is the kind of I call it pyramidal, whatever you want to call it. He had 25 of those. And he had 100 of the hinge plates of number 26, which is on another page. I'll have to bring that page up. It's sitting here waiting on me to bring it up somewhere.
It's behind you, yeah.
Yep. I think number 26 is there. Yeah. So it's that one right there. Is my arrow showing up, by the way?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. All good.
Yeah, just to give you an example, the kind of stuff that he had, in inventory that he hadn't used, that was there to be used. at the beginning.
But that's a good example of strap hinges versus true strap hinges.
Yeah, because you can see that number 110 there on the page on your left, right there. You know, it's a true hinge.
True hinge versus the decorative.
These guys over here are decorative.
Nice, that's excellent.
What's he call them? Kinge plates?
Who?
K-I-N-G-E plates.
It's a fancy
hinge plate.
Hinge plate.
Hinge. Oh, okay.
Hinge.
So those are hinge plates, and those are hinges over there.
We figured it out. And so, anyway, that kind of shows you what he has. At that point in time, most of the stuff he was buying.
Wow.
Or having made, I guess would be the way to say it.
And so Michael, the impression here is that Gus was selling this to anybody who wanted to buy it.
You could buy hardware from him because in the 1905 catalog he had the prices of the hardware. The 1905 metal catalog, I should clarify that, the hand wrought metal catalog. This doesn't show the prices, but the catalog actually has the prices. So you could pay, I have no idea, $1.20 for that number 60 hinge. For that one there. I'm guessing at that price. I don't know if that's true, but you know, they were $1 something or $2. So yeah, you could buy the hardware. I don't, in the sales records, you don't see much of it being sold.
Well, that's what I was thinking. You don't see much of it showing up on non-stickly pieces either. So it makes you think that this didn't go over so well as a financial venture in terms of generating income.
Good point, Bruce.
Well, no, I think you're right. I think this is yet another one of these things that didn't make any money. Well, he was making this stuff to put on the furniture.
Right.
You know, it wasn't like this especially made, other than this stuff up here in the top left, which is for houses, which is like what Dave Rudd just showed you, the interior door hardware. You know, so he was trying to, you know, get you to buy his hardware to put on your doors in your house that was a Gus designed house.
So years ago, like back in the early 80s, I got a call to go into a house down in the valley of Syracuse, south of Syracuse. And I was to see a gentleman by the name of Mel Kelly. And Mel was, at that time, was probably in his early 90s. And he went to Central Tech High School, which was the main high school in downtown Syracuse. And he made a sideboard, and it was a pretty nice sideboard. And he used all Stickley hardware on it that he bought from Stickley. And I ended up selling it to a woman, and I told her the story of it. And from then on, that sideboard was referred to as the Mel Kelly. And she would call me every once in a while to let me know that Mel was still doing fine, you know, and it was kind of cute. But he did a nice job, and he did a Morris chair too, and he had his mechanical drawing for the design of the Morris chair, and that went to a customer that bought the chair and the design, and had the design framed and was hanging over his Morris chair, you know. So both pieces were done by Mel Kelly. But I rarely see Stickley hardware on generic pieces.
And you see it on Charles Stickley pieces.
See it on Charles Stickley pieces, and you see it sometimes on pieces by Majestic Furniture too.
Where are they from, Dave?
They were up in Mexico, New York, north of Syracuse.
Oh, right. I know Mexico. I've been there.
I don't think so. Yeah, it's up near Oswego.
Right.
And they actually used hardware that looked more like the Benedict hardware I showed you in that catalog. It was very flamboyant, but I think I have seen some like the oval pulls and things like that they had. And they probably got them from Gus.
My niece lives up in Mexico.
Oh, does she?
Yeah. Remember when I came up for her wedding?
Who am I talking with?
Oh, Elizabeth Clark.
Oh, yeah, right. Sure.
Yeah, right.
Sure. Yeah, I do remember that. Yes.
Hey, David, the in the background behind the Morris chair?
That's Mike Adams.
All right. When the Gus version of that, would they have been doing that in-house or would that have been jobbed out?
That would have been in-house. Because that's not I don't think that was an early lamp.
Just a later design.
Later design, yeah. I mean, obviously that shade wouldn't have been on it, but it would have been a little art glass shade or a willow shade. But he was pretty accurate in making the base.
On the glides on the pieces of furniture, like chair glides, what were the differences, if any, between the furniture manufacturers? Like even within the family, the Stickley, the brothers, were there differences?
Well, there's different types of glides for different things, and L&JG tended to, for larger pieces, had some really kind of massive glides that would have been held on with like 3 screws, whereas Gus would have just used a 3-prong glide that you tapped into the bottom of the leg. Stickley Brothers, I think they used a 3-prong glide. I mean, L&JG also used a 3-prong glide, but I've seen some really big ones on some, like their settle legs and things like that. But I think that the 3-prong one was a pretty popular glide. You could still buy almost the exact thing today. And you know what? This stuff works pretty good if you want to darken those down too, and then put a little wax on them. And if you're across the room, you don't see a silver at the bottom of the leg of your chair.
I used to know who we bought those from, but I can't remember it right now, but the name they used for them was something that was bizarre. And it took me weeks to find out what that actually was that they showed up in the inventory. And I can't remember that, but it was nothing close to glide the way they described it.
Oh, okay.
Thousands of them.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could buy a box of 500 of them for, the larger ones for, maybe $30 or something like that. They're not very expensive.
Yeah.
Do we know how many different patination colors there were? I mean, was it a standard set of colors that you could get on the hardware, or did he?
I don't think they gave you a choice.
No, there was never any delineation of patina.
I think iron was always blackened and copper was always medium brown.
Yeah, and brass was darkened.
Brass was darkened, yeah.
So that piece that you were showing us earlier, the mitered mullion case, that was brass hardware on it?
The mitered mullion case?
Yeah, the bookcase back there that I asked.
No, that was copper.
Because it looks like very brass colored in the
Well, it could be the light in here on this camera.
Someone wants to know if you can name some of the hardware companies that supplied to furniture makers in Grand Rapids.
Oh, I really don't know a lot about the different suppliers in Grand Rapids, but if you can get a copy of Don Merrick's book about Grand Rapids metalwork, that has some really good essays in it on different manufacturers in the Grand Rapids area. And if you want to send me an email, I could, I'll respond to it and I'll take a look in there and I can send you some information.
You all might be interested in knowing that Peter Copeland at the Turn of the Century Editions Parchment Press has just acquired a whole bunch of those, that Don Merrick's book.
Yeah.
So it's now available again.
All right, we have anything else? If not, I think I'm going to call it a night.
So who made the clock? I'm looking at the grandfather clock behind you, David.
Yeah.
Who made the faces for those clocks?
I'm assuming I don't think Gus did.
That's right. At least early on, he didn't.
There are too many different versions of that face. I mean, there are all sorts of different faces.
A bunch of different versions. You're right. Okay?
Right. So, are you testing me? Do you know the answer?
Yeah, this is a quiz.
Okay, that's what I thought.
The later ones, Dave, because the later ones is always the case. They're much simpler.
Yeah, this is a later clock.
Yeah, and they're much simpler, right? That's kind of brass with applied numbers.
Well, that's the way all of them are.
No, but some of the early ones have starbursts around them.
Yeah, some of them have the corners. Some of the numbers are a little bit more decorative, but they're always copper on brass.
Yeah.
And then these little divots, you can see where there's some missing, like this one isn't missing. This is actually, I think, a piece of sterling that's in there that's been tarnished. So you could polish that up so that it would stand out against, like the seconds here. Those are all little sterling dots.
It looks like the screws are not original.
The screws are original.
Are they really?
Yep.
They're just kind of plain old iron screws?
Kind of a soft flathead screw. I think they were used by the clock companies. I mean,
and they're not even clocked.
They're what?
They're not even clocked, lined up.
Not even clocked on the clock.
They're not even clocked on the clock. You're right. Good point.
Now I notice on the clock the face is up against an outline that is polygon-like. Did he eventually go in the manufacturer's clocks to more of a circle? Do you know what I'm speaking about?
Oh, the bezel?
Yeah.
They were usually faceted like this. I'm trying to think of that Viennese design that he did that it's splayed out and it's got all the little individual panes of glass and it's got the top of the clock is made like this with the dovetails. Have you seen that grandfather clock?
Mm-mm.
Seen one version. I think Skinner sold it years ago.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those over the years, and that one I think had a round face.
I think Gus with that particular clock with a round face.
This one?
I'm pretty sure the one at Crescent Farms had a round piece of wood around it.
Okay, I think you need to go check your pictures again. Right?
All right, I got caught on this before, but I don't remember it. Maybe Davey Willis, do you remember
that either? What?
Does our clock have the dovetails?
Our clock has got the sunburst. The sunburst corners.
Yours does?
Yeah.
Oh, up in the corners.
Yeah, it's square frame. It's got little sunburst.
Right. Yeah, that's the way mine is at home too, Tim.
I've been trying to talk about the Crescent Farms clock, which of course we've only had briefly. We don't have it anymore, but my memory is that had a round circle with a wood face. But Dave is questioning it, and he was right the last time.
That's right.
And Dave went with me to pick it up when we brought it down to the farm. So
that's right. Yep.
So you remember, Davey, it actually does have a faceted face then.
Oh yeah.
So the answer to the question is Rome Brass and Copper Company, who made the faces.
Oh, that's who made the faces? Okay.
Yep.
Rome Brass and Copper Company.
Rome Brass and Copper Company.
That's interesting.
Are they still in business today? We could get some?
No.
That's Rome, New York, not Rome, Italy.
Yeah.
David, and the movement for the clocks? Go ahead, Alan.
Those are usually Seth Thomas.
Almost always Seth Thomas.
Can you show the tacks on the 1902, 1903 Gus book rack or book stand, magazine stand?
The tacks, yes. What did I do with it? Oh, there it is. So these are the medium-sized tacks.
That's what I was talking about. They're almost they really project outward, right?
It's like a 50s car.
Right. I mean, they're I'm gonna get a bigger one here.
Leather on the end of it, David?
See, that one's a little flatter, and this is a bigger diameter tack. So these are a little rounder. Yeah.
Are they tacked on there because of what?
It's a little bit, is that a little leather strap on the edge?
Yeah. What they would do is this leather would have hung down about that far under the shelf. And it was there so that when you dragged a magazine or book off of this shelf, it would keep the dust from going onto this shelf. So they were like dust protectors.
Sounds like he was hanging out with Irving Gill and
that's possible. And smoking something.
So David, are you saying that there was the leather was hung down further than it does right there?
Yeah, yes. It was about
a. Seen one like that? Because I've never seen one that the leather didn't look just like what you're seeing there.
Oh no, I have one at home that mine at home. The leather, there's much of the leather still intact, and it hangs down probably a 1/4 inch below the shelf.
We have one.
I have a tree of life stand that the same thing. It does the same thing, although the leather is now.
Leather gets brittle and gets broken off by sticking your hand.
Yeah.
Hey Ray, those 50 hubcaps I think were called Baby Moon. That's what they were called.
Well, I'm looking at the nails on my desk right there, so I feel better now. Yes. I know the leather's been replaced, but I wondered whether the nails had come from somewhere else.
Anything else?
Thanks, Dave.
Dave, yeah, I think we got to let you go, David. This is great of you guys to do this.
No, there's another question here.
Straight or scalloped edge?
The leather would be straight. The scallop is because it's worn, because the tacks on this actually hang below the bottom of the shelf also, because originally that tack was covered by leather, so they wanted to square the tack up on the piece of leather and not necessarily on the piece of wood. So when this wears down, that's what it looks like. It looks like a scalloped edge.
It's only 5:15 in California.
Yeah.
Wow. Past David's dinner time.
All right, Dave.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Well, thank
Thanks
you
for coming, everybody.
These 4 sessions have been remarkable. Thank you.
Yeah, they've been great. Thank you very much for volunteering to do it. And I have to point out, tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock is our final live small group discussion with Herb Stratford, the director of the Stickley documentary.
Right.
Got some exciting news about distribution of that. So we'll check in with us at 1 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Like I said, that'll be our last small group discussion for this Arts and Crafts month of February.
Right. One more thing to add. If anybody's interested in getting the news from the Gustav Stickley House, you can go on their homepage and put your email address in and you'll get our newsletters, because we're going to also be showing that on when it's released, March 5th.
URL, Dave? What's the URL?
It's Gustav Stickley Housefoundation.org.
And I just got to say too, Nancy and I have not missed too many of these things. We've not missed too many arts and crafts shows, and we've been involved at the Stickley Museum for a long time. But Bruce, you and Kate have just knocked it out of the park with this. And David and all you presenters, Mike, you've just been awesome. So really appreciate this. We learned more this week than we have in the 30 years we attended the conference, I think. But
well, I don't want it to end. Yeah. I don't want it to end. I want it to keep going.
I hope we can all rendezvous. We should have a reunion at the Grove Park next year. Just say, I was there. I was online.
I think everybody should bring their laptop and stay in their room, and we can Zoom.
That ain't good idea. But I would suggest that all of us that have done so well with this, we paid a very small price to participate in this. So I think a contribution to the education fund of the Arts and Crafts Foundation will be a good thing to do. So Nancy and I are going to be doing that.
It's a good idea, Davey.
Sounds good. We have to remember there's a whole other group that have watched at night, or
exactly right. Yeah.
We're the ones that have watched a lot of them live, but a whole bunch of other people have watched it separately, and they probably feel a part of it.
Yeah, I've loved the recorded lectures. They've been great.
Yeah, I know. I feel good about it. Yeah. I feel like I've been in past Grove Park Inn conferences, and that's really a nice feeling to know that I haven't missed out on some of the past programming because it's been made this possible this year.
Yeah, no, it's been great, Bruce.
Yeah,
thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Bruce.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, Bruce. Thank you, David.